Hello. Today we'll look at how you know it's time to buy your own home, and how you can make it happen. In many people's minds, buying their own home is the biggest investment possible. It's true that for many people it's both a great desire and a great value, but it is not necessarily true to say that it's the biggest investment of all. In most cases, the decision to buy a home is driven by emotion, not necessarily by economic considerations. It could be it's time to have a home of our own, or we would just be more comfortable if we moved to a house with a garden, but there are obviously many other considerations. Before you emotionally say yes to anything, let's look at what you need to know about the basics. If only because, if you make the wrong decision, the bank will not be sentimental about the execution. First, let's look at the most common reasons why many people think that real estate equals investment, and why this is not always the case. It's natural to need somewhere to live, and whatever the size of that home, it needs money. If you are not renting, but living in a flat bought on credit, you are not paying rent. And that shows a picture in many people's minds that if you don't have to pay it, it's as if you've earned that much. With a property bought on credit, you are effectively renting from the bank, where the interest paid on your loan is what the rent is. It won't be yours for a few decades. This is true for the property you are currently living in, and it is also true for the property you bought to rent out. The property you bought to rent out will be discussed later in the video, so I won't go into it here. The other argument that is often made that property is definitely an investment is that property prices tend to go up. What you can buy now for say 10 million, you can sell later for more. Anything that can go up in price can also go down, depending on how sought after the area or property type is. So forget about arrow straight growth in this topic. Obviously it will go up over time, you can sell for more, but just because prices have gone up doesn't mean you will move out of your home. So you won't realize that increase. And even if you move out, it is clear that you can only buy a house instead of the one that has gone up in price in the same way. Third, let's look at the most professional thing, which is how you define investment. Well, if you define investing as you paid a lot of money for it. If you bought it on credit, you're paying off your credit every month without missing a beat. You pay all the time for maintenance, preservation, or just to, say, remodel and spruce it up. And obviously you pay taxes, utility bills, and so on in the hope of making a profit. Then maybe you should watch something nice on YouTube. If you have bought something as an investment, be it property or whatever, you don't have to wait 20 years for a return. You can also expect to earn more than the expenses involved. Before you get me wrong, there's no problem buying something. It's not a problem if it's expensive or even luxurious. Just know that doesn't make it an investment. Buy them as long as it doesn't overwhelm you financially. The family budget topic can help you plan this. And yes, you can also buy property specifically for investment purposes and make a nice profit. But in this case, you should look at it with an investor eye. Know what conditions it must meet and what return you yourself expect from it. Just because it is yours does not make it an investment. In the next section, we look at how you can tell if it's time to move into your own place. At least when it comes to money. If it's not time to move into your own place, you'll definitely know from the following signs. The first is if you can stay in your current rent at a significantly lower rent than you would pay on a mortgage. In that case, you should save the difference for yourself, or even invest it, thus reducing the amount of the loan you will need later. Whether you can still stay may depend on the human aspect. It may depend on how far away your workplace is, or whether you get on with your landlord. Another sign is that you don't want to settle there, or it's not decided yet. If your job is likely to call you to another city later on, it's completely unnecessary to think about buying a property at the moment. If you are just unsure, ask yourself whether you can see yourself living in that place in the next 4 to 5 years. If you can, then it's time to think about buying your own home. During this time frame, the costs of the property exchange, the cost of the loan, and any other extra expenses related to the property will usually exceed what you would gain. The third sign is when you know it's not time yet, however much you may want it to be, if it puts too much burden on your family budget. You may be saving a lot just for the down payment, and even if the bank approves the loan, you'll have to do your best to make sure nothing goes wrong. Although many people take advantage of the bank's offer, but it also involves a considerable risk. Let's look at an example where the bank asks for half of your salary as repayment. If something unexpected happens just once with a 20-year loan and you miss a month, you'll have to pay an entire month's income to get even. This either comes very slowly or you don't even spend the next month on food. And that's just 1 month's blooper, even through no fault of your own. While this doesn't feel good, you can still roll it over and over in front of you. Before the bank hands it over to the collector, you have about 2 months' time frame. But playing this tickler for 20 years is nerve-wracking, so before you take the plunge, think twice. Finally, perhaps a more pleasant sign that it's not yet time to own your own home is that you simply haven't found a home where you can see yourself as an owner. It was mentioned earlier that roughly 4 to 5 years is the time span during which it is cheaper to rent a property. If you don't like the apartment you are offered at all, rent for the few months you are looking for rather than replacing it later. If some of the already mentioned cases are not the case, it's probably time to start thinking about getting your own place. You should now have at least an overview of whether buying a home is the right direction for you. If so, you probably want to know the best way to get there. The most obvious way to do this is to buy it if you have that much equity. But in most cases this is not an option. One hand, you may not have enough money, but if you are good with money and sufficiently aware of how to manage it, it is not necessarily a good idea to buy it with 100% of your own money. This is where a home loan comes in. We have already talked about the importance of choosing the right property. The same is true for the financing bank. Most people start looking for a home loan after they have found their dream home. But you can even start this in advance, to get to know your budget and what you can afford. Although the difference between offers may seem small, it can still mean a lot, as we are talking about up to 20 to 30 years. Optimally, this one step is all it takes to move into your dream home. But banks are bound by law and cannot finance the entire property. The maximum value depends on a lot of things, but it cannot exceed 80% of the purchase price of the property. This is only the purchase price and does not include other costs and possibly furnishings. You must have this as a deductible. You may wonder what you can do if you don't have that much saved up at the moment, but the loan is within your budget. I would add, not only does the bank say yes, but it really is no problem for you. Then you can do 3 things. The first is that more banks will accept replacement collateral. Second, third property, garage, land, vacation home, almost anything which is not farmland. It doesn't have to be yours, it could be a relative's. For example, many parents use it to help their children move into their own home. This property must be acceptable by the bank, both in terms of size and condition, and many banks are reluctant to put commercial property up as collateral behind a private loan. Once you have the necessary funds, you can move in. If this way is not for you, there are still options, although they really do require a high income, some practice, and very conscious money management. But what is this method? I mentioned that 80% of the purchase price is financed by the bank for you, the rest you have to pay yourself. This just means that the money has to come from some other source, you cannot take it out as a home loan. Basically, don't look at another loan as self-help, because it's not your money, you have to pay it back, and if you don't succeed, the repayment of the home loan will probably be interrupted, which sooner or later will lead to the executor. But, as I mentioned, if you are conscious enough about managing your money and your income is high enough to be approved by the bank, you can take out any loan without any property collateral, say a personal loan. This type of loan will typically have a much higher APR than a home loan, but if you calculate whether it's still worth it to you at that higher cost, and the answer is yes, it's a way to make up some of the missing capital. And option C is that if you have a business behind you, you can use it to solve this. Either you take the loan through the company, or just by guaranteeing it, or by using an option that works for you. Obviously, a prerequisite for this is that your business must be stable enough to be creditworthy. Now that we've looked at when to buy your own home, let's also look at the way to buy it as an investment, specifically to rent it out. It's a natural need to want to get more out of your money, and a well-chosen property can be a good tool for this. The performance of property funds shows this. I would emphasize the properly chose property. By blindly jumping in just because everyone is already in real estate, you are unlikely to achieve nearly as much as you would like. It was mentioned earlier that there is often an argument that property prices are rising. I'll quietly note that everything else is going up in price. The price of real estate is just as much subject to cycles driven by supply and demand. The same applies to investment property. When people have money, it's looking for its way. That's why investors choose the direction that suits their own means and tastes. In addition to or instead of stocks and bonds, you can also make nice gains in real estate. Of course, you can buy investment property even before the recession, but it may not produce enough for you until the next recovery. But you can expect expenses to be associated with it. How you can determine for yourself how much profit it has generated for you will be covered in a later section.